32 teams. And so joining us, because we initially did have Derek Larger of Bring the Juice podcast discussing more about the Colts, but really getting more in depth and love exactly his content and his insights. Jake Arthur is joining us, Locked on Colts. Tell you what, before we start digging into Colts stuff, I mean, thank God, right? Like this was a month and a half of this stuff. It's driving me crazy. I'm ready to go on vacation this weekend. I mean, was this kind of respectfully the deal that Ayuk was going to get at the end of the day?
Felt like it, yeah. And I'm right there with you. I'm glad it is finally over, because it's like at a certain point, like we went through the Jonathan Taylor drama last year. Mm-hmm. So it kind of had me gave me Vietnam flashbacks about the whole thing. But this one went like a step further. It was just, I was tired of hearing about it every day from every major reporter. It's like, thank God, with a week before week one is here, that something finally broke. And honestly, in terms of the Colts, man, did they get Michael Pittman Jr. at a deal at the beginning of the offseason. He was like the 10th highest paid when he got his deal. Now he's like 15th. Like the receivers have been getting the bag this offseason, and the Colts really lucked out with that when it comes to Pittman.
Yeah, no, and you know what's funny about this is like even looking at the Michael Pittman deal, because initially when I looked at it from the first couple years with the Colts when he was on this roster, is like, I got to get him a capable number two. I think they figured that out once Josh Downs started coming around. Then I got Alec Pierce, who's another option, and then Adonai Mitchell. I mean, from what we started with just one receiver that you just felt like, man, it would be nice if we gave him a little help, to where he's not the only targeted, where now all defenses are just going to come at him. We got to have somebody that's going to at least lighten the load slightly, but yet still at least put up productive numbers. Was that kind of safe to say at the end of the day, and now finally giving him this contract?
Oh, yeah, there's a whole lot that went into it. And just a little glimpse of that, the game that probably showed Pittman's worth the most and got him that contract was the one game last year that he was out with a concussion against the Falcons. It was one of the Colts' worst offensive outputs altogether. Now, Gardner Minshew had a lot of problems, but having Michael Pittman Jr. helped mask a lot of it. Without that, they were totally inept. They couldn't do anything. So we've seen what it's like when, you take Pittman out of the equation. Now, this year you bring Anthony Richardson back into the mix, which opens up the entire playbook. But like you mentioned, Alec Pierce, he can start to show a little bit now as well. There's been a lot of rave reviews about him. I witnessed training camp every day there, and he definitely had his best camp. Chris Ballard mentioned that this week. Shane Steichen talked about how impressive he's been as well. Josh Downs, like you mentioned, should be an incredibly productive player. Like even to us on the media, we're kind of whispering, could Josh Downs lead the team in receptions this year? Because his connection with Anthony Richardson is really strong. So Alec Pierce being a little more useful now, having a quarterback that will go downfield to him, and Josh Downs just continuing to do his thing from the slot, an incredibly cerebral player. And then anything that AD Mitchell can bring you. I mean, he's looked as advertised throughout camp, but they have it's not dire that he comes in and performs right away. Like they can kind of ease him into whatever role they see necessary. Now, until Josh Downs gets back, Mitchell is going to be one of those top three receivers. It's been mostly him in the slot with Pierce and Pittman on the outside, but they're kind of rotating all three guys based on matchups. But the receiving core is a lot better this year. I even asked Shane Steichen about that today, because when they went through roster cuts last year, when they cut down to the initial 53, they kept three receivers, which you can't do that on a roster. Like they had things to figure out after that, but it just went to show you what they thought about the group. This year they came out of it with 6. And there was at least 2 more guys who had a really strong push for that roster. They got guys like Laquan Treadwell on the practice squad. DJ Montgomery is a really quality player for the practice squad. So they've got a lot better. And, they've got a bunch of guys with utility who actually could play if they absolutely needed them to. So their receiver group is just in a lot better shape now than it was before.
I'll tell you what, though, when you're dealing with a rock star like Shane Steichen and the way that like his offensive presence, how he spreads the ball out around to all of his weapons, I mean, the possibilities are endless there for the Colts. That's where I was like, what I've seen last year in that first season with him, I'm like, this is what he's done when he was an OC with the Chargers and then an OC with the Eagles. And you got the best out of, a bunch of the star players, but even for the up and coming players that that needed to step up as a next man up mentality. So an interesting one, and I'd love your context on this. Now, I know it was preseason, and we do, like you and I, we evaluate a lot. We try to see and get a preview of what the season will look like for some teams. So Kurt Bankirk, a former quarterback, came out and evaluated Anthony Richardson. And from just the context of it, he's just like, I'm throwing my towel up. I'm not sold on this. I'm on the back end. I'm defending Anthony Richardson because, one, you're coming back from an injury. So, of course, a lot of these things, trying to get the playbook right and then trying to rehab and recover and be ready for the season, it's a lot of things. So, I mean, what was your initial thought when that first came out? And how have you kind of seen this putting into context with Anthony Richardson gearing for 2024?
Yeah, so for every, Kurt Benkert who said he's out on Anthony, you've got Chase Daniel and JT O'Sullivan and these other former quarterbacks who are like, oh no, this guy's got some juice. He's pretty good. I think the problem with Anthony is there's very little middle ground. You've got kind of the Anthony haters and you've got the Anthony stans, and they're both very loud. It's almost like politics, there's like really no middle ground and everybody has to argue their point. And with that preseason game against the Bengals being on national TV, it got, everybody got to watch. And I just think a lot of stuff got taken out of context in there. Like, yeah, the game as a whole was pretty sloppy, but him personally, he only had like one or two bad throws. The pick six, the tight end, who was the intended receiver, was supposed to be further inside. Anthony threw it to the right spot, but the tight end was not there. There was a missed third down to A.D. Mitchell, where Mitchell, if this was explained afterwards, coming out of his break, expected a different coverage, but saw something else. So he hitched a little bit. He stopped his route before he kept running. Again, Anthony threw it to the spot where AD was supposed to be, but Mitchell wasn't there. Now, there was another third down throw where he just airmailed it, and that was genuinely an awful throw. But I just think people kind of fail to see things in context. Like, they look at everything. It's a lot of box score type of stuff, but like, look at everything that led to each throw. Look at each throw individually. But I think he kind of gets dropped in the bucket of, super athletic, big-armed quarterback who can only run but doesn't have it between the ears. And I'll tell you what people rave about the most about him, like within the Colts, is his work ethic and his ability to process what he's seeing and literally like his field vision. So it's going to take him being on the field and actually being healthy and giving everybody more than 4 games to scrutinize so that he can prove himself. But I think it's going to be loud on either side until we get that larger sample size. But personally, as someone who has covered him every day since he's been here, I mean, he's still got the arm, post shoulder, everything looks perfectly fine. He obviously is big and athletic as advertised. But he really does. He has it between the ears. He really does. And there's guys out there who don't have to give him that credit that do, given any chance to do so. I haven't heard guys rave about Gardner Minshew like that last year, like not even Joe Flacco this year. Everyone is very, very confident that Anthony will be a success story, at least within the Colts organization. And it's coming from guys who don't always heap praise on players so easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I mean, I just am like, I'm not giving up a project just because of like the injuries he's accumulated And again, we got a preview of what we've seen from Anthony Richardson with his athleticism, his accuracy, and the ability to throw the ball downfield. It only makes it exciting because we saw with what Shane Steichen's been able to do, even with a quarterback that you now have combined. You dealt with Justin Herbert at one point, pocket passer, throws the deep ball, and then you've got the mobile runner in Jalen Hurts. So when you put all those together, I mean, that initially you are getting one quarterback. So I'm wishing the best of success for Anthony Richardson because I just think the state of the AFC South is so competitive now. The Texans are going all in. The Colts end up addressing some spots. The Jags, it's really a rebound season for them after what we just saw on the tail end. And then there's the Titans with, is Will Levis really the guy? So when you look at the state of the AFC South, right, with the competition brewing up, how do you evaluate a lot of these opponents in this division and what we may potentially see all throughout this year?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, Jacksonville, I think, is better than what people think. I mean, last year they were very comparable to the team just a year ago that won the AFC South, and that's still kind of the case. You know, they've done some nice things. So I wouldn't count them out by any means. Of course, Houston now deserves to be the favorite. Really impressed with what they've done all offseason. I've never been a huge fan of what Tennessee has got going. They always just seem to lack the depth that gives me confidence in them. But I fired off a tweet the other day. I don't know that any other team has done enough this offseason to help their defense as much as Tennessee has. I've been really impressed with what they've done. So the Colts, I mean, it is concerning the lack of outside activity that they have been involved in compared to what the rest of the division has. Now, decision makers within teams don't do things based on what their opponents are doing. But the Colts, it just goes to show you they are very confident in what their team looked like last year, but add Anthony Richardson to it because they essentially ran it back with the exact same roster, save for, the draft class. But no, it's going to be a super tough division. I don't think the AFC South is just going to be a doormat anymore. With the exception of the Titans, I think the other three teams all should be, bottom line 500, around 500 or better. I think all three should be expected to compete for that AFC South crown. I don't know about Tennessee yet. They may be a year or two out of it. Again, I think they're going to have some games that probably surprise some people, and they're probably a little better than some people give them credit for again, but it depends on Will Levis. You just have to see. It's very much like the Colts. I think the Colts have a pretty good roster, so they'll be fine regardless of whether it's Flacco or Richardson, if something happens to Richardson. But obviously you're not going to reach that ceiling unless you have Richardson. And I think it's kind of, with Tennessee, it's totally based on what happens with Levis. I think they'll go as he goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just excited for this division as a whole, and the fact that what we've seen on the blueprints of Houston last year, and now to come into, now we got all competition brewing up with all the teams in this division. I mean, at this point, it's anybody's game here in this division. So I had this player, rookie, that out of my top 10 draftees coming into the league that I feel like could be a serious presence in this league. So one of them I had was Laiatu Latu. And the reason of it is because I loved his athleticism and the instinct he had at UCLA. The fact that he came in at a time when Caleb Williams at USC, when they were playing, they looked marginalized. And Latu was just a brute force. Explain to me what we may preview about Latu being a part of this defensive pass rush, because I just think this guy, after what I've seen from a couple names, like Jalen Phillips in Miami, and even a couple of other hyper athletic pass rushers, what should we expect from Latu this year?
Yeah, I hate to sound like a homer, but you're kind of asking me about their most exciting players. Latu has had a great summer. I'm like to always kind of proceed with caution when it comes to pass rushers. I think it takes them a little while to acclimate. But I mean, we all saw leading into the draft, the guy had the best tool belt of pass rush moves coming in, and it was all kind of, but the neck injury. Well, I mean, the neck injury has not been a problem, and the Colts are a team in particular that will not sign off on like serious injuries like that, like guys with heart conditions or neck problems or like degenerative knees. Like they don't invest in that early in the draft. So for them to, go all in on Latu and make him the first defensive player, they must feel very confident in his medicals. But as of being a player, he has looked really, really good throughout camp. Now, the Colts have obviously had, the 3 preseason opponents, but they did joint practices with 2 of them as well. So Latu has had huge moments against, the Colts blockers, Arizona, Denver, Cincinnati. He got a sack on the first play from scrimmage against the Bengals in that preseason game. And just the way that people talk about him and how he moves, I've talked to his personal position coach, trainer that he uses throughout the offseason, Eddie McGilvra. He said he's very reminiscent of like a TJ Watt and how they move. Guys he talks to say, he reminds him of Nick Bosa as well. But the way they talk about how he moves and how he's able to avoid blockers' reach and just like get away from the grasp of blockers, it's like I just have never heard in any pass rusher talked about like that before. And with that said, I don't think he's going to come out and get like 15 sacks right off the bat, but
right,
as long as the Colts, give him a healthy amount of snaps, I am expecting double-digit sacks, in year one. I think that's realistic. It's been done 36 times before by rookies, even a few times within the past, recent history. So I think the Colts have got their next marquee pass rusher. I mean, so far so good, but there's really no test he hasn't passed yet.
Yeah, I mean, initially when you're plugged into a defense with Zaire Franklin and a couple of them that that you could rotate up around, be that kind of that Mike presence at the end of the day when you need to put in pressure, you need to go in and stop the opposing offenses. I just am like the size, just the brute force that he brought in UCLA. I was just like, I had to put him in my top 10 because I mean, initially, like the guys I had from Jalen Wright to Joe Milton to Alufa Shanu and then like Latu, I was just like, this is just too rich for me to pass that up as somebody that can be a very good defensive player and somebody that I think will be fun to watch in the near future in the AFC. So finally, before letting you go, because I've asked this with everybody and I've told people like, I'm digging all of this in this week with the NFL because next week it's game on. With everything that you've seen, being close with the team, getting the insights, how do you preview this Colts team for 2024? And what would you say would be the record prediction? Because Chase and I did our breakdown in the AFC, and my initial thought is I could see the Colts finishing second in this division respectfully, but then nab the playoff spot because I just think with what Shane Steichen's done, it's too rich to pass that up and not think this team could be a playoff team.
I definitely think it's a team that you're gonna have to rely on health because they do have a couple scary spots. Of course, I've talked about with Anthony Richardson. I think he's their ultimate X factor. Everything they've done this offseason proves they think he's their X factor as well because they just brought back the same team but are re-adding him into the mix along with Jonathan Taylor, a healthy Jonathan Taylor. Offensively, I think they'll be fine. With his youth, there are going to be days where he probably looks terrible. But there's also going to be days where they look like they're one of the best offenses in the NFL. And it's just really about finding consistency and improving and not making the same mistakes over and over. But with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor together and a pretty well-balanced, explosive group of receivers and an offensive line that's one of the best in the NFL, I love the offense. Now, defensively, they did have 51 sacks last year. They were top 5 in the league, and now they're adding Latu into it. The pass rush is going to have to work because their secondary is terrifying in a bad way. Yeah. The corners they're rolling with, it's kind of a young and experienced group, but at safety, it's an even bigger question mark. They're going to be super reliant on guys like Kenny Moore, Juju Brents, and Julian Blackman in the secondary. And particularly Brents and Blackman have really struggled to stay healthy throughout their careers. Brents is only 1 year in, but even from the time he was drafted to literally right now, he's just getting over a broken nose. The guy has really struggled to stay healthy. Kenny Moore has had his bumps and bruises and has missed some games as well. So they are really relying on their few best players on the back end to stay healthy, but that really hasn't been the story of their career. So this could definitely be a bend but don't break defense that's going to be super reliant on sacks and big plays if it's going to work. And the offense is probably going to have to show up day in and day out in order for them to get through. I think their floor is about 7-8 wins. I can't imagine them regressing much with Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco being their quarterbacks because Gardner Minshew was very capped in what he could do last year. Yeah. But they were still they were in the red zone about to be in the playoffs, but couldn't convert on a 4th and 1 there in week 18. And I think 10-11 wins is probably their high end. I mean, if they were 12-5, like I'd be a little surprised because I think teams that go 12-5 carry a certain aura about them that they haven't proved that quite yet, but they have a lot of ingredients to be an explosive team that could beat just about anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good thought because initially, I had this team potentially 10-7. Like my hot take through the AFC is I feel like we're going to get 4 teams that may end up with 10-7 because this reminds me a couple years ago when we had 3 9-7 teams, and then that was the year that Tyrod Taylor and the Buffalo Bills got in. And so I'm feeling like we could see a repeat of this with 4 of the 10-7 teams in the AFC that are going to potentially fight for those 3 wildcard spots. So that was my thought initially with the Colts, because for them to be that close last year and yet no cigar, I feel like they're bound for it this year, knowing Steichen and moving this offense. And then I do have a feeling, though, even when I looked at that defense, because I felt the same way about the secondary. Do you think this is something next year, because knowing it's going to be highly defensive in the draft, they're going to have to go and address that corner or safety at some point?
Probably. I mean, the secondary is the position group that we keep griping to Chris Ballard about every time we talk to him. And he is defending them, with his honor. He just said on Wednesday, he said, they don't become players until they play, which is true, but they're putting a lot of eggs in the basket of guys who have got to stay healthy that haven't really done so. Yeah. And I can see this being a group where we see snaps from guys who are on the practice squad right now or who are cornerback 4 or 5 just because they struggle to stay healthy. If they stay healthy and they look great, awesome. None of us want the worst to happen, but it's like you're stuck on the train tracks and you can see the train coming but can't get off. Like, we can all see this being a huge problem, but maybe they get off the tracks in time. I don't know. It's easily the most glaring weakness on their roster, but they're confident in it. You got to give them credit for that. They're at least defending their decisions there.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I was at first worried about the direction of the team, only because we know with what Jim Irsay is, and we know that, Chris Ballard and everybody was trying so hard to keep the ship afloat. But I think now, because they've gotten a couple breaks, I think it's finally easing a lot of that pressure that Chris Ballard had been in, but there still are some things to address. So it's in the working motion, and that's why I'm kind of glad that the Colts were kind of on the edge of slipping out the book, but now they're kind of back on that chapter now to where they're starting to get competitive, and I just think, a playoff team sounds about right for me. I appreciate it, man, and love the content you've been bringing out every single day, man. Where can people find you getting locked in on the Indianapolis Colts this season?
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me. So I am one half of the Locked On Colts podcast. You can catch us on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm also the deputy editor of Horseshoe Huddle. That is the Indianapolis Colts website over on si.com. We are just going, full bore towards the season. If you're ever looking for anything new from the Colts, you could pretty much get it from Locked On Colts and Horseshoe Huddle. I bring out video content and interviews with players and coaches all the time. My co-host and I, we run a daily Monday through Friday podcast. So if you ever need anything Colts, just give me a shout, and I could definitely take care of that.
There you go, guys. Just to get you locked in on the season, because, I'm getting locked in next week because prime predictions are back. I'm excited to, place my bets up with my new Inferno 5. And who knows? I mean, I'm looking at that Texans-Colts game next week, and it's got me thinking a little bit. This is going to be fun with week 1. So appreciate the insights, Jake. Take care of yourself. Enjoy the week and the Labor Day weekend. And next week, we're in full, ready mode, man. So I'm excited for this year.
Absolutely. Thanks, man. You too.
Absolutely, man. Oh, there you go, Chase. I think at the end of the day, it